The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Michael Hollywood is in the house.
That's right, Michael the Ripper, Holly. Just remember that, Al.
Hollywood.
Oh, Hollywood works too.
Yeah, well, no, not really. I mean, London's far better than Hollywood.
Yes.
You know it's bad when London is cleaner.
Hey, you know.
Your city, and London's like 5 times as old. That's embarrassing.
Is that where you are, Michael, London?
No, what's happened is I have Unsolved Mysteries wants to do some filming in one of the places, because it's Jack the Ripper, they want to film in London. So it's like, okay, twist my arm. I will go.
Yeah, far better. Of course, you have to take me along. I'm your personal agent.
Gotcha.
4-star hotel.
My wife and I did one of those Ripper tours years ago where you do the tour and then you end up at the 10 Bells and then the guy sells you copies of his book. It was really fun, though.
Right. Was it Don Rumbelow?
It was, yeah.
There he is. I'm telling you.
Don?
He's actually one of our top experts, so it's actually a very credible guy.
Right on.
So, but I remember that that's what he would do. He would sign those, so that's a good thing.
We have a copy, a signed Don Rumbelow edition of his book. We had a great time.
Yeah, so keep that. That's gonna be worth money someday.
Yeah, Paulie's going to take over for him.
Right on.
The wife will want to go though.
He's just waiting. He'll be over there, and all of a sudden, he'll go missing. I guess I'll have to take over.
That's right.
It'll be the new tour. Mr. Doolittle. I haven't heard that name since the 60s. You're bringing it back again. Dr. Doolittle, But Sean Doolittle, so Device-Free Weekend is your new book. It's a thriller. So tell us a little bit about the premise of the book first.
Okay, well, yeah, so like you said, it's Device-Free Weekend is a thriller. People have called it a techno thriller, and I suppose that's generally appropriate. It's about a tech billionaire named Ryan Cloverhill. Ryan Cloverhill is the founder and CEO of Link, which is the largest social media platform in the world. And he has a powerful desire to disconnect from this device-driven world that made him rich. And so he invites his 6 best friends from college to a reunion on his private island in the Pacific Northwest.
How many years is from college to this event?
They're all in their 50s now, so it's 25 years. They met in the early 90s is when they went to school, kind of before the internet came to everyone, and so now they're reuniting in the social media age as people in their 50s, which Ryan basically helped invent, and so they're gonna spend the weekend. The premise of the weekend is no devices, so they're going to spend the weekend hanging out like the old days. And it starts off great. He wines them and dines them, gives them a ride around the island in his boat, and they have great food and great wine, and they sit around laughing their faces off, and everybody goes to bed feeling pretty good until the next morning. The guests wake up to discover that Ryan has disappeared. And he's left them alone and hungover in his house on his island with no way of contacting the outside world. And so that's kind of the setup for the plot that ensues. It probably wouldn't be a thriller if Ryan Cloverhill didn't have some ulterior motives for bringing this group to the island. So his goals and his plans and the group's ultimate fate is kind of the twists and turns of Device-Free Weekend.
I was thinking techno in the 90s. There was a nightclub I went to in Seattle. It's kind of timing of talking about a CEO of some sort of social media empire being who we've got currently running empires of social media and being very much in the media and stuff. And of course, so obviously, without me getting into the story too much, your tech CEO is kind of he's not a nice guy. Doesn't sound like.
I think he wants to think of himself as a nice guy, but he does have some qualms about this thing that he's created, and he has what I would call a rather bold plan for trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and he's gathered his old friends around him to either help him or stop him or fall by the wayside in the process. But he's got some big plans for sort of recapturing what he sees as a monster on the loose, which he's responsible for unleashing.
And he does not tell them, it looks like.
Yeah, I said to another group recently, maybe the no devices rule should have been a clue for them, but they didn't know they were walking into a thriller. They thought they were just going to a reunion with their old pal.
Right.
And so does this CEO also own a electric car company or anything like that, or?
No, not explicitly, but I think people who read the book will probably see some similarities between Ryan Cloverhill and the people that we hear about in the news daily.
Well, do you sort of bring that kind of into it? Not so much that particular story, but because they are social media and your guy's the CEO of social media, it does circulate the news a lot because they're part of it, now. And so when you've got that, do you bring that whole aspect into your story, or are you trying to stay away from that?
Well, I guess a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not trying to intentionally depict any specific person, but in trying to write a novel about a social media billionaire and make it seem somewhat authentic, there's lots of little tidbits of stuff laying around in front of us all the time that you can kind of use, to kind of shape the character. And so, like I said, people will see some similarities, and I didn't set out to, satirize or lampoon anybody in particular, but I guess I would look at Ryan Cloverhill as just kind of an amalgam of the people that we see on the news and testifying in front of, Senate subcommittees and, everywhere else we look.
So you're not blocked off of any of the...
Yeah, you're gone. You're gone.
Not that I don't. I'm not a power user of social media anyway. I have a Twitter account that I use mostly just to recommend books that I like and promote my own, of course. But I'm not...
Well, that'll be disposed of soon.
Yeah, people, it does seem like it's sort of like it feels kind of like imagine the last days in a city before the bombing breaks out or something.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot. The activity has gotten pretty low there, but, we'll see what happens. Mm-hmm. But if Elon catches wind of this book,
I keep seeing people.
I was just going to say, if he catches wind of this book, he's just going to block you, period, anyway.
He's going to put you on that starship and let you go.
Yeah, I don't know what I'll do if I get blocked by the CEO of Twitter, Alan. It might ruin
Sequel.
Yeah, there you go.
So, listen, where does it all come from for you? Like, it looks like you've kind of been writing more in, what would you say, horror, sci-fi sort of in the past, or is that wrong? I sort of just by the titles.
As a young writer, I started out writing short stories, and at that time I did start out kind of writing horror short fiction just because growing up, the writer who most lit the fire for me to want to be a writer in the first place was probably Stephen King. And so I spent my early years trying to emulate, that kind of thing. And for novels, my first several novels were more in the kind of crime noir sort of area. I did, you might have seen the title of the book that came out before, Device Free Weekend was called Kill Monster, which was sort of my attempt at a kind of a fun action creature feature. But primarily I'm known as a kind of a crime noir writer. And this book, I would say, is the first time I've taken a crack at something where the scope is a little bit larger. The stakes are, I've never written a novel where the stakes were global before. So this is my first attempt at that kind of larger thriller.
That's definitely because Ryan's such controls so much with that.
Right. I mean, he's, I can't remember. And again, I'll mention Facebook or Meta, whatever we're calling it now, not because that is the direct inspiration necessarily for Link, but I mean, I think there's 3 billion users.
Amazing.
That's all around the world, right?
So when you're doing this, I'm not sure how to ask, but what is first thing? Is it the story idea, the theme, or is it a setting, kind of where you're at or what you're in, or is it a character? Like how did this story like this start?
Well, I'll tell you how this story started for me. I was kind of in a place where I was looking around for my next novel idea, and I was thinking to myself, well, what do I care about now? The things that intrigued me when I was in my 20s and 30s are a little different than the things that I find myself thinking about now. And one of the things that I find myself thinking a lot about is social media and what people are doing and saying and believing or, acting, on social media. It's such a prevalent part of our lives. And I have kids who are out there on social media, and I'm out there on social media. And, as I was kind of thinking about this book, I started to see some things out there in the media. Like I saw a news story about restaurants who would, take your phone at the door to kind of you would sort of volunteer to be forced to have a normal, unplugged dinner with whoever you were with, without the distraction of screens. And I started to see stories about destination vacation packages that would advertise themselves as being device free. And I kind of, and I was also, kind of figuring out my own comfort level with social media around this time. And I was starting to detect what I thought was kind of almost a yearning amongst people to disconnect instead of, be plugged in all the time. It's really hard to get away from our phones now. If you use a smartphone and are, plugged into the internet, they have made our lives incredibly convenient, but it's kind of hard to get away from them.
True.
And so, I was thinking about those things, and I'm also I'm a guy in my 50s now, and I'm starting to look back at my own, I'm starting to have little feelings of nostalgia for my, younger days myself. And so, the idea of wanting to disconnect combined with the idea of, kind of wanting to recapture moments from your younger self, sort of stuck together in a way that made this idea start to percolate a little bit more, I guess you'd say. When I was, I went to college in the early and mid 90s like these characters. And I remember I took a trip out to Seattle during that period. And this would have been sort of the period of what I think of as peak Seattle, when, Nirvana had come onto the scene and grunge was kind of taking over the cultural consciousness, and everybody was thinking and talking about Seattle. And it was at a time when I was a young adult, kind of broadening my own horizons in school and learning new things. And this trip to Seattle was quite formative for me. And, I remember having my first Starbucks cup of coffee and just being very enamored with the place. And as I was thinking back, if I was thinking about, a reunion sort of story for college friends, and it seemed very natural to have them have gone to school during the same period that I did, because comes from my own experience. And, Seattle seemed like drawing from my own memories of that trip, combined with the fact that there's a lot of tech out in the Pacific Northwest, that seemed to fit really well. And so the idea for device-free weekends sort of came together that way, with, me just thinking about a few different kind of things that seemed to relate to each other, and they started sticking together, and the idea kind of clicked into place. For me, titling a book is usually the hardest part of writing it. I often struggle with titles, and this is one where the title almost came first. I think I saw somebody advertising a vacation for a device-free weekend, and I thought, boy, device-free weekend, that'd be a good name for a book. And everything else sort of kind of started clicking together pretty quickly after that title presented itself.
Vibrator-free weekend. Oh, Seattle was that's a good old place for me too. Like as in, college and working and hanging out, pre-grunge, grunge, and all that sort of stuff. That was a pretty amazing time. I think it's my favorite time.
Yeah.
Looking back.
Yeah. It was definitely a transition period. Lots was changing and Seattle's a great town. It was the early mid-90s feels like a good time to me too, but it's always hard to know like how much nostalgia is coloring your memory. And
well, it seemed like people were a lot happier. I don't know if that's true, but it just seemed like it was a happier time, let's say.
That's one of the aspects of social media that I kind of wanted to play around with in this book. Social media is great in the way it lets us connect with each other around the world easier than we ever could before. It also lets us yell louder and push each other's buttons, and it does kind of like, I don't know how you feel. I assume you guys use social media to some degree.
Oh yeah.
Often, like if I start my day on social media, it often colors my mood for the worse for the rest of the day. If somebody says something that I find just absolutely outrageous, it sticks in my head and sets my mood for the day. And I think culturally we see that happen on a larger scale. It does feel like at times people seem angrier than they used to.
Yeah.
What's interesting is in the world of teaching, before all this, these devices, the fights at high schools were usually on Wednesday, but now it's Monday morning. Monday morning, because they get all of the device stuff going, and so everybody's going to, take care of the business right when they get to see each other.
That's interesting. Yeah. Huh. Well, it's like, you carry the water cooler around with you in your pocket at all times now, right?
Well, and it's a little different for us because we're a little older in the sense of, we're not in high school right now,
right.
So, we don't carry things right through. It's not this, I think it's a different thing with the younger generation that it is for us. Plus they have different concerns.
That's right. I mean, my kids, their way of living life and interacting with people is both the same as it ever was and completely different. Just the cultural norms of, that generation that has grown up, on, Snapchat or TikTok or whatever it might be. I mean, it's a different way of growing up for sure.
Does this book have any of that, of the younger generation, or is it basically centered on all of these people from the 90s?
These people, it's centered on these people from the 90s, and some of these people from the 90s have kids, but that's sort of a peripheral sort of character element to the book. I don't focus on the perspective of today's youth, let's say. It's really more guys my age or, people my age and older kind of looking at the world from their position.
He doesn't care about young people. That's what he's saying.
Youth is wasted on the young, isn't that the
saying? Well, so writing a character in a thriller or in a book like this must be quite a bit different than writing it in more of a crime, noir, drama sort of thing. It must be a different type of character.
Yeah, I would say that that's true, particularly in the sense that, except for Ryan, who is living in a kind of a rarefied world of extreme wealth, none of them are criminals. They're all just regular people going on a trip. And so, I guess it's different in that way. And I also, I really wanted to portray lifelong friendship in a way that seemed both entertaining and realistic. people have asked me, like, how did you research billionaires? How do you know what it's like to be a billionaire? Do you know billionaires? And the answer is no, I don't know billionaires. None of my close friends are billionaires, but I do have college friends and old friends. And one aspect of this book that I wanted to play around with is something that kind of interests me generally, which is I find it kind of fascinating the way you can get, there's a certain kind of friend where if you reunite after a long period of time, no matter how your lives have gone, the twists and turns your lives have taken, or your relative social status, you kind of immediately revert to the interpersonal dynamic that you had with that person, when you left off. And so I guess I started building these characters out from that thought, which is, that they're gonna ditch their devices and get back together like it's 1992. And they're going to act with each other the way they did when it was 1992.
So did they realize that Ryan was not the person they knew, or is that actually the person that they actually knew?
A little bit of both. He is both exactly the person they remember and somebody they don't know at all.
Huh.
What I was trying to get at with character-wise, when you're writing something like, Kill Monster, let's say, or let's say you're writing like Rain Dogs or something, and there's a crime center. And so whatever point of view of mind you're writing from, the killer or non-person, there's a level of deceit, and I guess that would be in there too. But there's a certain level of evil that goes on in a murder crime that you're kind of letting readers get to know. And I imagine with the characters in the Device-Free Weekend, you don't have for most of them, other than the guy that pulls it all together, everybody else's mind would be remembering better things. Like you wouldn't be writing from that sort of point of view,
Yeah, I think there's something at the core, at the center of the Ryan Cloverhill character that it's not like, I'm not asking the reader to confront the mind of evil, let's say, but there is, Ryan's got some abandonment issues, and he's got some emotional needs that he's never fully figured out quite how to meet. And so the things that made him act the way he did when he was young are the same things that are making him act the way he's acting now. He's just got all the resources in the world at his disposal now. And so like what I want is for the reader to find a way to kind of understand and empathize with this Ryan Cloverhill character, even though what he's doing is just, absolutely outrageous and over the top. Like Ryan's plan is, like I said before, is quite bold, and on paper, it would almost seem unrealistic to imagine that anyone would do what Ryan is planning to do. But I wanted to see if I could make it seem realistic in the context of this character and what he wants and doesn't want out of life.
Was that hard for you to write, that kind of character? Like, it's kind of like writing an evil character in a sense because someone that's doing something wrong, a lot of times in their mind, they think they're doing it for the right reason. They have a different, let's say, a view of the world than, let's say, what the majority of the people would have at the time. And so in their mind, they're doing something good, or they're doing something, there's a reason why, and it should be done, and they have sort of this theme about them that they're doing the right thing. Right. And so it sounds like you're trying to let the reader understand why that is happening, right? Even though it's wrong. But so how is it for you as a writer to try and write that?
In this case, I would say writing Ryan, who is basically our villain, I wouldn't say it was emotionally difficult. It was technically difficult to kind of walk the tightrope I was trying to walk with that character, because again, what he's doing is outrageous, and to make a person doing an outrageous thing seem authentic and believable took a little bit of a touch. And it's up to the readers to decide whether I pulled it off or not, but I was always very conscious of, trying to make Ryan seem both like an authentic human being, but also like somebody who might conceivably do what he is doing. You mentioned my book Rain Dogs, which I would say that a book like that main character, I had a main character who was suffering from chronic depression. He'd lost a child, and he'd gotten himself into a pretty heavy drinking problem, and he was really morose and depressed for most of the novel. That was more like the emotional difficulty of writing a character like that, simply because you spend so much time in that character's head, and if you're doing your job right, it can't help but sort of start to color your own outlook on life. So a character like the protagonist of Rain Dogs, I would say, was emotionally difficult to write. I wouldn't call Ryan Cloverhill emotionally difficult. In fact, he was kind of fun it was kind of fun to write an over-the-top villain, to be honest. And I enjoyed writing the banter between Ryan and his pals. But technically it did feel tricky a lot of the time.
You have all these friends. I'm sure that there were probably some kind of old wounds back in the college days. Did you have any of those, like today's stress that they're going through, pull up any old wounds?
Yeah, for sure. So the way this group breaks down, there's the protagonist of the novel. Another thing that's a little bit different about this book for me is that it's really an ensemble cast. There are 7 characters that I was dealing with who I wanted all 7 characters to feel like prominent parts of the, like a prominent part of the novel. And I wanted them to all feel like individual people. One of them can reasonably be called the protagonist, and that's a guy named Stephen Rollins. And so there's this group is made up of 5 men and 2 women, and this was a group of 7 friends. That group over time became 2 couples. 2 of the guys are a couple, became life partners, and one of the men and one of the women became married and had children. And then that leaves Ryan and Stephen, the protagonist, and Emma. We learn as the novel goes along that Ryan has been smitten with Emma his entire life, and it was Emma and Stephen who kind of got together as a couple in college. And they eventually broke up, but there was a sort of like a triangle formed there that has never really disintegrated. So when they get back together, on the surface, it's all friendly, but there is that shared history and those old wounds there that do play a part in how the novel plays out.
Gotcha.
Especially after Ryan transitions to Emma.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. No. There are no overt gender issues in the novel. There are definitely there's some baggage and some history with the characters.
Right.
They say writers put in a little bit of themselves in all the characters. Who is the one character in this book, for instance, that, let's say, has the most of you, or you're attached to the most?
I don't have an immediate answer for who I'm most attached to, but I would say the Stephen Rollins character, who is the ostensible protagonist of the book, I would say probably is the closest to me. We don't necessarily have all the same opinions and the exact same worldview, but like he's, the protagonist, and I think that's probably true in all my books. The protagonist is usually the character that's closest to me, most resembles me, I guess.
You're a good guy then.
Well, I was going to say, but there are times when people say the protagonist was so unlikable that I just couldn't take him. And of course that, you got to not take that personally. But yes, of course, some parts of you end up in all the characters. It's just inevitable.
Why write this book? What was this about? Or is there something behind the main idea, the entertainment part of it, the thriller part of the book? Is there something underneath that, or something that you particularly wanted readers to take away from your writing?
Well, I would say, for the most part, my goal was to write a book. as a writer, I got to a point where I felt like I needed to have some real fun writing a book, and this book was very fun to write, and I want the main takeaway from the book to be that it was a fun read. I don't want it to be disposable fun, though. I want you to care about the characters enough that maybe they stick in your mind after the book is over. I'd like you to think about these people a little bit after you've finished reading, and I'd like the book to stay with you. But I also, I wanted the book to be thought-provoking about the technology-driven world that we live in, without really being preachy about it or having a specific message that I wanted to deliver. But I did want readers to kind of maybe do some extra thinking about, the nature of our society now and what it's like to be plugged in all the time, and maybe think about, their device usage a little bit, in a different way than they did before. I don't necessarily need them to have one specific opinion about it, but I wanted it to be thought provoking for sure.
Even the title does that. When you just read the title, that's the first thought you have.
Well, this will sound like bragging, but I kind of feel like you're right. And that's what intrigued me about the title to begin with. You almost have a reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
And I find readers, have said the same. It's like, oh my God, I would never I would never give up my phone, or I can't wait to give up my phone. It seems to, ask you to have that reaction.
Right.
Trigger warning.
Yeah.
Read with caution. What made you decide to get into writing, period? Like, where did it start for you? Were you the guy that was writing in school that always loved it and always wanted to be a writer, or was this something that just came along?
It started for me the way it starts, I think, for a lot of writers, which is that I was always a reader growing up. I wasn't always a writer, but I did always love reading. I like in school, elementary school, middle school, I usually, looking back, I can see that I kind of excelled whenever there was a sort of a creative writing type assignment. Although I didn't really think anything of it at the time. At the time, I was more concerned about, sports and things like that. I was in high school, toward the end of high school. I think I was about a senior in high school. I had an English teacher who he would read to us like one Friday a month. If we'd done good work, he would take Friday off and read us a short story. And his favorite thing to read from was the short story collection Night Shift by Stephen King. I mentioned that Stephen King influence earlier. And that was, after he'd read us a couple of short stories out of that book, I ran out and bought that book for myself and just read it to death. I just loved them so much. And that was the first time I really started to feel like, oh, I want to try doing this. I want to make happen what these stories are making happen in me as a reader. And so I guess I remember when I was a senior in high school, I remember, I had no idea how anybody became a writer. But I tried my hand at a couple of kind of very bad, kid stuff, short stories. And I really loved doing it. And I remember my senior class went on a field trip to the library. I think we had a research paper or something. And so we went to the local library in Lincoln, Nebraska. And while everybody was looking up the books they were supposed to be looking up for their papers, I went and I found a copy of the Writer's Market. They used to publish, I'm sure they still do, or maybe it's all online now, I don't know, but I think it was maybe Writer's Digest who published the Writer's Market every year. And the Writer's Market was just a big, basically a phone book of places that were looking for fiction. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's how you do this. You just find some place like this that's asking for fiction and you send them something. And so I was senior in high school, starting to send out short stories to places that I found in the Writer's Market, and none of it was publishable in any way. But that was where I started getting the sense of, sitting down and writing a story and showing it to people and getting comments and revising it and then sending it out, printing it out and sending it in an envelope with a self-addressed stamped envelope so that the place could send you their rejection letter and waiting by the mailbox for those rejections to come back, and kind of got my taste of how the process worked that way. And I loved it. And I got some, little bits and pieces of positive reinforcement along the way that just kind of like kept me hooked, I guess.
I go around to shopping mall bathrooms and leave my books in the, stuff like restaurant bathrooms and best places.
Yeah, well, that's why I picked up your book.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave some of mine around there when you leave.
Yeah, it works really well. It doesn't take long, and before you know it, they're calling you.
Is that how it works? I've been doing it.
Yeah, well, that's how it works. You got to get noticed, You do what you have to. So any of these girls in this device-free weekend were exes of yours that you wrote about?
No, those, I can say, I am one of those nerds that...
Don't worry, your wife's not listening, so don't worry.
I was about to say I'm one of those nerds that married his high school sweetheart. Yeah, I started dating...
So which one is she then? Come on.
That's right.
Probably the women are both me.
Stephen, like them.
The women are probably both me too, really. It's, writing characters is sort of a narcissistic activity, I think, sometimes. Did you guys ever see that movie, Being John Malkovich?
Yeah, long time. Yeah.
That scene where John Malkovich himself takes the slide down into his own subconscious and it's all John Malkovich and he comes back saying, I've seen things nobody should ever see.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think about that when I'm writing.
Well, how does it change you? You write a book like this and like any of your books, once you complete a book and you finish it, do you notice any difference in yourself, or do you think that it's changed you somehow?
I think what I notice, I guess for me, like writing these novels, even though they're fiction and they're genre fiction, they're meant primarily to be entertainment, but nonetheless, they are kind of my way of processing the world around me and what I think about things. I started Device Free Weekend with, really the thought I want to poke around in this idea. And by the time the book is finished, I realize, okay, this is what I think about that. Even if I don't put it explicitly in the book, I come away with sort of my own deeper understanding of how do I feel about the world of social media and technology. I now have a better sense of how I feel about it. And it's not for me to tell you, it's for you to, come up with your own response to the book. But I personally kind of feel like I understand what I was trying to say. And that, for me, is the function of writing these novels. It helps me understand what I think about my life.
So positive book reviews are good about your life, then.
Yeah, positive book reviews are better than your life is terrible, for sure.
Yeah. Did you ever kill anybody in books?
Let's see. I don't know if I have straight up killed somebody that I know.
You just make them suffer.
But I have made people suffer, yeah.
Well, that's good. Give us some names, phone numbers. We'll get a hold of them. We'll put them on the line.
Yeah. I try to use some sleight of hand there. Like, you as much as you put yourself into characters, you sort of can't help but put amalgamations of people that you've met into them too. And I try to keep it as hidden as possible. I'll mention another movie. There was an old Woody Allen movie called Deconstructing Harry about a writer who just very blatantly plagiarized his own life and the people in it. And so everybody who knew him hated his guts because they all saw themselves in his books. I don't want that.
I think that can happen even if you don't.
Oh, you're totally right. Yeah, people see themselves in characters even when they're not, or as far as you know, they're not.
I'm just saying that Al writes about serial killers, so we got to watch out for Al.
Yeah, let's turn this around on you, Al.
Yeah.
How much of yourself is in your serial killers?
Well, just the ones that get away.
Oh, there you go.
But my characters already exist. For most of the books, I'm not creating characters. I don't get to really tell you who they are. They have to tell the world. Right. So it's a little, you get to have control over them, and sometimes it comes from personal experience or how you feel. And I was just saying that, I was just going to say that with the last, quite often the thing that, we notice or see about ourselves, when we look in the mirror, are the things we don't like. Mm-hmm. And we think everyone else sees them. Yeah. But quite often they don't. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the trick is, or the thing to be focused on, is hitting that. And that's why some people will see themselves in characters, even though they're not. You never even thought about them. But they see something in that character that they feel about themselves.
That's interesting. Yeah. I think you're onto something there. I've heard a lot of writers sort of tell humorous stories about like basing an awful character directly on somebody that they know. Yeah. And then the person that they know reads the book and says, "Oh my God, that character is so terrible."
Right. Because the thing is, it's what they're focused on about themselves. We don't always see what everyone else is looking at,
On the flip side of that, I've heard actors say in interviews and things that, like when there's makeup involved, with a role, that it's almost a freeing experience because you feel like you're not presenting yourself, like you're hidden behind some kind of a mask or something, and more able to portray certain things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's probably like you in the book. Like you can do things with characters that sometimes that's why I'll ask, what character do you sort of, put yourself into or feel the most about, because
that's a good point. If you kind of use the characters as a costume, I guess you're right. You probably can do things and say things that you wouldn't yourself do or say.
Yeah. It allows you to do things that you wouldn't do in real life. Freedoms.
Like Ryan Cloverfield. Here's a guy that's doing something really crazy, so I'd be curious to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be, who knows? It's a weird, that's why, you've got, Michael Hawley hanging out down in the London giving tours of Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, so I wear a Jack the Ripper outfit, something like that.
Yeah, it's this way of acting out how he really is.
Well, I do write about serial killers myself, and that narcissism, I just love it. It's just all about me.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I can't, So, listen, Sean, how do people find you? I guess they don't really, but you have a website and Facebook, it sounds like. What else? What kind of things do you want readers to find and locate you at? Where do you go?
Yeah, you can. I have a website that is really just like an online business card, with information about my books and stuff, but that's SeanDoolittle.com. And if you want to find me on social media, I am on Twitter, and my handle is @SeanDoolittle. There's another very prominent Sean Doolittle out there. If you follow baseball, there's a major league pitcher named Sean Doolittle. His handle is something else. I've been confused with him many times online, but I'm the one that's @Sean Doolittle.
Well, that's a good way to get a really nice hotel.
I've tried. It doesn't work.
See, you find out these stories about people. That's true. Well, and you're saying Stephen King. Now let's see. I have to write that down. Is he a writer?
Well, he's new.
I couldn't find him on Amazon. I guess he's a writer.
Yeah, check him out. The books are hard to find, but they're worth it.
So what's next? What comes after this?
Well, I'm working on the next book. I won't say too much about it right now, just because it's in progress, and I don't know how it is with nonfiction, but sometimes in fiction, it kind of like talking too much about something too early can kind of burst your bubble a little bit. So I'll keep it intact. But I'm working on another thriller. It's kind of a road trip story, and I'll say that it involves a brother and a sister, twin siblings, who go on a road trip to scatter their father's ashes. And
I'm going to predict what it is. Okay. Kill Monster was your previous one.
Yes.
Now you're in the Pacific Northwest. I think it's going to be something about Bigfoot.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, not specifically, but in spirit, you're closer than you think.
See, Al? See?
Yeah. Well, there you go. You must have wrote this over COVID, and this. Does that sort of stuff do weird things around you influence you? I mean, because we talk to some writers, and they'll go, well, no problem writing during COVID. It was easy, and it gave me more time. And then we have other people that are so stressed out, anxiety over the world that they're like, can't concentrate. 200 words every week, maybe.
Right.
How was it?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, you're absolutely right. This was my pandemic book. I mean, it seems like every writer wrote a book during the pandemic, and this one was mine. I was one of those writers who found the lockdown to be incredibly conducive to writing, and felt guilty about it a lot of the time because I was aware of how horrible this period was for so many people, and that I was kind of getting off easy. My family didn't get COVID for the first time until just this year. Like, I got it in the fall for the first time, and my wife and son just got over their first round. So we really came out, pretty lucky. And for me, I'm one of those writers who kind of thrived during the lockdown. But in terms of how it influenced the book, I think there's a lot, it's really easy to come up with ways to talk about the social media as being a bad thing.
Right.
As I was writing this book during the lockdown, I was also at all times aware of the fact that social media and computers and technology were the only way we had to stay in touch with our loved ones if we were following the rules and staying indoors and whatever. I mean, it was the thing that was also gluing us all together during that very difficult time. So I wanted both of those aspects to be part of the book.
Oh yeah, I think it's with anything, everything that comes along. They thought TV was Satan in a box.
Right.
We got TV, and even the old phone things. Saw an old movie the other day where, from probably the 50s or something, but it was, the guy comes next to the house and knocks on the door and invites the lady there and her family over for dinner. And she said, well, why didn't you just telephone me? He goes, I still can't get used to talking to a box. Right? And so because we weren't there that long ago, that we can't really remember things like that. But you have to wonder how each thing has changed people, and they probably had the same sort of insecurities and feelings. And then,
I mean, you're right about like the time. Like I've said this before, but it's amazing to me that the iPhone, which was sort of the first of the smartphones that we kind of recognize today, and all of us have, and we use them for everything. That didn't even come on the scene until 2007. That's only like 15 years ago, I mean, and the whole world has changed in that decade and a half.
Well, okay. So thank you very much for being on the show. Of course, now your newest book, Device Free Weekend, and that is out now, and it came out February 28th. So, the author is our guest, Sean Doolittle. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, guys, and have a good time in London, Michael.
Thank you, and nice speaking with you, Sean.
All right, take care.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.